This video is sponsored by Card Kingdom. You can find all the cards in this video in their store by using the links in the description below. Hi everyone, I'm Nitsa Hone, and it's time for another MTG Top 10, the series where I rank cards based on their historical performance at Magic's highest level of competition. Today we're looking at 3/4 creatures. Ultimately, I'd like to do every stat line in this series, and because today is March 4th, written as 3/4 in the United States, I thought it was a good time to take a look at the identical stat line. Obviously enough, to be on this list, a creature had to have 3 power and 4 toughness. In all, there were 474 cards eligible for this video, and in it we'll look at the 10 that have left the biggest impact on competitive Magic. The 3/4 stat line has been more successful than you might think, and this list is pretty impressive. Before we get started, here's a quick reminder on how I score cards in these videos. A first tier top 8 is worth 2 points, this includes events like Pro Tours, and a second tier top 8 is worth 1 point. This includes events like regional championships. Alright, let's take a look at the top 10 3/4 creatures in Magic. At number 10, it's Brimaz, King of Oreskos. This 3/4 costs 1 generic and 2 white. He comes with Vigilance, and anytime he attacks or blocks, he brings a 1/1 cat token with Vigilance along for the ride. Vigilance goes great with those abilities because it means every turn cycle he's capable of spitting out a pair of 1/1s, and all of that is on top of its efficient stat line. He was played in a pretty wide variety of decks in Standard, including all-out aggro decks like Boros, as well as blue-white control decks. He's also gained points in Modern Hate Bear and Legacy Death and Taxes. After being dormant for many years, Brimaz has recently started to see fairly heavy play in Pioneer, as a main deck card in Selesnya Aggro, and as a sideboard card in blue-white control. These sideboards also use Regal Caracal, and bringing both of those in together makes it pretty impossible for creature decks to beat you, since you end up with so many efficient bodies, and if Regal Caracal's in play, they even have lifelink. Brimaz is well positioned to keep gaining points in Pioneer, and he's got a shot at continuing to move up this list. At number 9, it's Archon of Sun's Grace. This 3/4 comes with flying and lifelink, costs 2 generic and 2 white, and gives Pegasus creatures you control lifelink, and that's important because anytime an enchantment enters the battlefield under your control, you get a 2/2 flying Pegasus token. The Archon can quickly build you quite the aerial army, and all that lifelink often simply puts the game out of reach for your opponent. It saw play in a wide swath of decks while it was in Standard, but Yorion control decks were its primary home. The Archon goes great alongside Yorion, because Yorion blinks a bunch of enchantments when it enters the battlefield, which will trigger Constellation several times. It also sees play in Pioneer Yorion decks, although most Pioneer versions of the deck are Fires of Invention decks, which often run lots of enchantments in addition to fires. The Archon is going to keep gaining points in Pioneer going forward. At number 8, it's Teferi, Mage of Zhalfir. For 2 generic and 3 blue, this 3/4 has flash, gives your creature cards flash, and only allows your opponent to cast spells at sorcery speed. In Block and Extended, Teferi was mostly played in control decks. In Standard, it was more of a sideboard card, and it usually came in as a way to interfere with counter magic and fairies, many of which had flash. In Modern, it's been used by control decks, but also various combo decks who've used Teferi to make it so the opponent can't interact with the combo. It's been included in decks like Ad Nauseam, Birthing Pod, Splinter Twin, and Scapeshift, but Teferi doesn't have points anywhere since 2020, and its spot on the list could be in trouble in the long run. At number 7, it's Linvala, Keeper of Silence. For 2 generic and 2 white, this 3/4 comes with flying, and it shuts off the activated abilities of your opponent's creatures. Notably, the effect is not symmetrical, and it even shuts down mana abilities. She was played some in Standard decks, like Fauna Quest, which was a toolbox deck that could tutor her up with Fauna Shaman when she was at her best. Linvala amassed most of her points in Modern during the days of Birthing Pod dominance. The pod allowed you to run lots of situational but powerful singleton creatures, and Linvala usually made it into those decks, as getting her at the exact right time, like once your opponent plays a creature with a problematic activated ability, can be pretty devastating for your opponent. Even after Pod got banned, toolbox decks in Modern continued to use her, but she hasn't gained points anywhere since 2020. At number 6, it's Wingmate Rock. For 3 generic and 2 white, this 3/4 comes with flying, and whenever it attacks, you gain 1 life for each attacking creature. And it comes with Raid, which means it does something extra if you attack the turn it enters the battlefield. In this case, you end up with another 3/4 flyer. That's right, for only 5 mana, you can get 2 3/4 flyers, one of which can also gain you some life. It was played in a whole lot of mid-range and control decks while it was in Standard, including Abs and Naya and Mardu. It hasn't managed a single point since rotating out of Standard though, making it another card that might lose its spot on the list in the long run. At number 5, it's Lear, Disciple of the Drowned. This 3/4 costs 3 generic and 2 blue, and makes it so spells can't be countered. That effect is intended to be more downside than upside, since if you could still counter spells, his other ability would be even more insane. He gives all instants and sorceries in your graveyard flashback equal to their mana cost. This means you can pay that cost and then exile them to cast them from your graveyard. In other words, when Lear comes down, he effectively adds a bunch of cards from your graveyard to your hand. That's a control player's dream. In Standard, Lear has been a key card for control decks ever since being printed, and in Pioneer he's played in Lotus Field combo. These decks use spells like Hidden Strings to untap the field and make lots of mana, and Lear lets you get double duty out of all those spells. He's likely to keep gaining points in both Standard and Pioneer. At number 4, it's Kalitas, Trader of Get. This 3/4 comes with lifelink and costs 2 generic and 2 black mana, and if a non-token creature an opponent controls dies, you instead exile that card and make a 2/2 zombie. Kalitas can also sacrifice another vampire or zombie for 2 generic and a black to give himself 2 +1/+1 counters. Transforming any creature of your opponents who dies into a zombie is some serious value, and it doesn't hurt that all of your opponent's creatures also get exiled when they go to the graveyard, helping you to disrupt any graveyard shenanigans too. Kalitas is the kind of creature who can utterly dominate in control decks, since he makes trading 1-for-1 with all of your removal spells way better, because you get zombie value anytime you do that. Then the lifelink makes it hard for an aggro deck to ever do lethal to you. He was heavily played in Standard, mostly in control decks, but also on occasion in zombie decks, since he gave you lots of zombies and could even eat them. He has also found success in several other formats like Modern and Legacy, but Pioneer is really the non-standard format where he has really left his mark, and another format where he's a fixture in control decks. He's going to keep gaining points in the future. At number 3, it's Endurance. For 1 generic and 2 green, this 3/4 comes with Flash and Reach, and when it enters the battlefield, up to 1 target player puts all of the cards in their graveyard on the bottom of their library in a random order. He also comes with Evoke, which means you can cast it for the alternate cost of exiling a green card from your hand, but if you do it that way, it gets sacrificed immediately. In other words, when you evoke it, you're really just doing it for the Enter the Battlefield ability, and that Enter the Battlefield ability is pretty darn good at disrupting graveyard decks, especially because Endurance's Flash can pull the rug completely out from under any deck trying to go off with their graveyard. So being able to do that at instant speed and for 0 mana is great upside to have on a creature that's already pretty formidable. It's for Modern Horizons too, and that means it has never been legal in formats like Standard or Pioneer, but like all the elemental incarnations in Modern Horizons 2, it's seeing plenty of play in the 3 formats it is legal in: Modern, Legacy, and Vintage. This is especially true in Modern, where it's effectively a staple. If you're playing a green deck with enough green cards to evoke this consistently, it's probably showing up somewhere in your 75. It's going to keep gaining points, and it's likely to eventually overtake the number 2 card on this list. For now though, that card is Restoration Angel. For 3 generic and a white, this 3/4 comes with Flash and Flying, and when it enters the battlefield, it exiles a non-angel creature you control, then returns it to the battlefield under your control. So, she not only brings efficient stats that can allow her to eat an attacking creature when you flash her into play, but you can also play her in response to a removal spell, allowing your creature to dodge it. She can also be used to abuse a creature's enter the battlefield or leave the battlefield ability. One of the nastiest things you could do with her in Standard was blink a Thragtusk with her, since you would get both the leaves the battlefield and enters the battlefield trigger every time you did it. She can also work as a combo piece, as if you combine her with something like Kiki Jiki, she allows you to blink Kiki Jiki over and over, allowing you to make infinite Restoration Angels. That said, she used to be really heavily played in Modern, and these days she only sees sporadic play there. And at number 1, it's Street Wraith. For 3 generic and 2 black, it's a 3/4 with Swamp Walk. Obviously, if that's all this was, it would be an unplayable card, but it comes with an awesome ability. You can cycle it for free. Well, free when it comes to mana. You do have to pay 2 life. This means you can discard it, pay those 2 life, and draw a card. You probably don't need me to tell you that drawing cards for free is a big deal, so it might surprise you that the Wraith didn't see any play in Standard and hardly saw play anywhere in Extended. And despite being printed in 2007, it didn't top 8 a significant event until 2010. Since then though, it's seen heavy play, especially in Modern, but the Eternal formats aren't safe from Street Wraith either. It sees play in a wide swath of decks in all of those formats, especially in combo decks. The Wraith just makes your deck more consistent. It's almost like making your deck only have 56 cards in it when you run the Wraith, because you have to do so little to draw with it. But there are 2 archetypes in particular where the Wraith is particularly powerful. One of these is Living End, a deck that appeared in Extended first and then got ported over to Modern. The deck was all about cycling away a bunch of creatures in your hand until you found a card with Cascade. Once you found your Demonic Dread, you always cascaded into Living End, which destroys all the creatures on the board and then reanimates everything you cycled, including those Wraiths you cycled for free. The Wraith is also extra good in Death Shadow decks, which appear in both Modern and Legacy. These decks look to lower their life as quickly as possible to make Death Shadow huge, and that makes the race one downside into upside, which is pretty insane. The deck also has a graveyard sub-theme, so the Wraith getting into the graveyard for free matters too. Street Wraith is going to continue to amass a ton of points in the non-rotating formats, and it's gaining points at a healthy enough clip that I even think it has a decent shot at holding off Endurance in the long run. So those are Magic's top 10 3/4 creatures. If you want any of the cards that appeared in this video, check out the description where you can find a Direct Card Kingdom link for each card that appeared in it. If you want to make sure you catch future videos, don't forget to subscribe. If you want to catch up on past videos, including more that look at creature stat lines, you should see a playlist on your screen shortly. Thanks for watching.